A faint sound on the porch, like small footsteps on wet wood. Gareth opened the door. Standing before him was an Apache girl, tiny, soaked, her wide black eyes staring at him through the rain. She said nothing, only trembled, clutching a piece of torn fabric tightly around her body. Gareth froze. He knew that helping a Native American child could get him hanged in this part of the country. But what he saw in the child's eyes was not Apache. It was human fear, the same kind he had once seen in his own daughter's eyes before she died. He picked her up, wrapped her in an old wool blanket, and stirred a bit of molasses into a cup of warm water. She drank, then fell asleep by the fire. The firelight lit up his sun-weathered face, where the scars of war no longer looked frightening, only silently marked the long road to ashes. Outside, the rain kept falling, and in the lonely house out on the prairie, a new heartbeat had just begun to echo. Dawn rose slowly over the Wyoming plains, the first light of day cutting through the mist and catching on the silver strands of Gareth Hale's hair. He stood on the porch, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, watching the tiny Apache girl sitting on the steps, her dark eyes following the old goats as they rummaged for fresh grass. He had not slept the night before. All through the night, the fireplace crackled, the rain tapped steadily on the tin roof, and the child's weak breathing wove softly in between. More than once, he had thought about putting her back outside, letting fate take its course, just like so many others had done. But each time the thought crossed his mind, he saw his own daughter's face, and something strange stirred in his heart. Something that had been dry and dead for years. That morning, when the first sunlight spilled into the kitchen, the girl woke up. The fear in her eyes had eased, replaced now by cautious watchfulness. Gareth placed a bowl of oatmeal and a piece of dry bread in front of her. She looked at him, hesitated, then softly said in a trembling voice, "Runa." He nodded gently, asking nothing more. "Runa," he repeated, as if to declare to the world that this child had the right to exist. From that day on, the house was no longer silent. Runa followed him to the goat pen, her clothes getting covered in hay and dirt, giggling when a young goat nudged her foot. In the afternoons, he taught her how to light the fire. In the evenings, she sat quietly while he played soft notes on his old guitar. Neither of them spoke much, but the silence between them no longer felt heavy. It was gentle, warm, and full of life. Gareth began fixing the fences, patching the barn roof, and every now and then caught himself whistling, something he had not done since the war. The cracks in his heart, the ones he thought would never mend, slowly began to fill with the smallest things: laughter, the smell of smoke from the stove, sunlight stretching across the window, and a pair of dark eyes that looked at him with absolute trust. One afternoon, as the wind swept in from the distant mountains, Runa came running back, holding a small yellow flower in her hands. She placed it in his palm and softly said, in halting English, "For you, Burr." He smiled, his chest suddenly heavy. The name Burr, her mispronunciation of his name, sounded clumsy and tender all at once. In that moment, Gareth realized he was no longer alone. Out here in this harsh land, where weeds grew over the graves of loved ones and the wind howled through memory, he had found a reason to live one more day. That night, the wind rose from the mountains, carrying the smell of wet earth and a trace of thunder. The sky churned black, lightning slashing across it like a blade of fire. Gareth Hale was locking the goat pen when the old horse suddenly let out a sharp whinny and turned its head toward the trail. In the flash of lightning, he saw a figure staggering through the rain, large, casting a long shadow in the storm like a breathing nightmare. He ran toward it. The rain lashed his face, and the wind tore at his coat, flapping it like wings. The figure collapsed just outside the fence. Gareth flipped the body over. It was an Apache woman, broad-shouldered and muscular, her bare arms marked with old scars and fresh lashes. Her dark bronze skin glistened in the rain, heavy like wet stone. She was taller than he was, by more than half a head. Her eyes were barely open, her breathing rough and ragged. He shook her gently. "Hey, can you hear me?" No response. Rain ran down her closed lids, mixing with the blood that flowed from her temple. He did not hesitate. He shrugged off his thick coat and lifted her. Her weight burned across his shoulders, like carrying the storm itself. When he reached the porch, Runa came running, shouting in urgent Apache. "Mama, Mama," the words sliced through the air like a blade. Gareth froze. The little girl dropped to her knees beside the woman, pressing her tiny hand to the rain-soaked cheek. The mother opened her eyes just long enough to see her child, and passed out again. Gareth laid her near the hearth and stoked the fire higher. The golden light wrapped around her cold, bruised body. Her breaths came in shivers. He quickly covered her with blankets, mixed a bit of whiskey into warm water, and rubbed her wrists to wake her. She did not speak English, only whispered something in Apache. Her voice low and hoarse, like wind howling through stone. He could not understand the word, but the meaning was clear. "Thank you." Outside, the storm still raged. Inside the small wooden house, the fire flickered on 3 figures. A lonely man, a trembling Apache child, and a giant of a woman locked in a fight with fever. Gareth sat up all night, changing warm cloths, dripping water into her mouth. Every time the wind slammed against the door, he gripped his rifle. Fear and instinct tangled inside him. But whenever she trembled, he only pulled the blanket higher and whispered, "You are safe now." By morning, the rain had stopped. Outside, the plains were draped in silver mist. In the golden light of dawn, the massive Apache woman still lay unconscious, but her breathing had steadied. And Gareth, after all his years of solitude, knew one thing for certain. Last night had changed everything. 3 days after the storm, the sun returned golden and warm, like a whispered apology. Tyen, the giant Apache woman, was still weak, but she could sit up on the wooden porch. The morning breeze played through her thick black hair, wet and heavy like a sun-drenched rope. Runa sat quietly in her mother's lap, her small fingers laced into the rough hands of a woman who had walked through hell. Gareth Hale stepped out from the goat pen, a hat full of hay in his hand. He paused, his eyes resting silently on Tyen's figure, broad shoulders, firm arms, deep black eyes, both strong and tired. Even in his old wool sweater, she did not look small. Maybe she never would again. "You should eat something," he said. Tyen looked at him silent, then gave a faint nod. Runa translated in Apache, and then, for the first time in days, a smile broke across that sun-darkened face. A strange smile, both sad and beautiful. In the days that followed, they learned how to live together. Gareth taught Tyen how to use a derringer. Her hands were so large they nearly swallowed the grip. She taught him how to read footprints in the dirt, how to hear the wind and know when rain was coming. She made cheese. He fixed the fences. In the evenings, the 3 of them ate together in the fading light, no wasted words, only breath and the sound of wind brushing against the tin roof. Tyen did not speak much, but every gesture carried weight. When she passed by, the faint scent of sun-warmed skin and wood smoke lingered enough to make Gareth's heart skip. He had once believed himself dead inside. But now, his heart beat again, quiet, but real. One afternoon, he saw Tyen kneeling by the stream behind the house, washing the scars on her back. The sunlight hit those old wounds, turning them into streaks of burning gold. She knew he was watching, but did not look away. Their eyes met no shame, no words, just a silent recognition between 2 souls that had once been broken. That night, after Runa had fallen into deep sleep, Gareth sat on the porch, staring out over the misty plains. Tyen stepped out, a thin blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She sat beside him, saying nothing for a long time. "Good people. Stay," she said slowly. Her English rough. He looked at her, the tall, powerful woman who had endured beatings and cold rain, now sitting beside him as if the world had never known cruelty. Gareth nodded, his voice low as the wind. "Maybe. I need to stay too." Above them, the moon rose soft and pale, like a wound finally healing. "Thank you for being here. If this story brought back something for you, those old days of red dust and hoofbeats echoing in your chest, consider subscribing to my channel, so that each day, we can sit together again. And I'll tell you one more story from the West. That night, the wind from the prairie slipped through the cracks in the door, carrying the scent of dry grass and the chill of the mountains. Inside the wooden cabin, Tyen sat by the fire, her broad shoulders bathed in its glow. The oil lamp flickered, casting shadows along the veins on her arms, arms that belonged to a body both powerful and weary. the kind of body shaped by a life far removed from gentleness. Gareth Hale poured her a bit of whiskey and sat across from her. Runa had already fallen asleep in the back room, her steady breathing ticking like the rhythm of time. They sat in silence for a long while. Outside, the wind howled past the fence, and faint stars drifted behind the clouds. "I will leave when I'm strong again," Tyen said, her voice low and rough from scars in her throat. Gareth shook his head. "You don't have to go anywhere." She looked at him, a flicker of doubt in her eyes, the instinct of someone who had been left behind too many times. Then she gave a tired smile. "You don't know who I am." She lowered her head, her large hands tightening around the glass. "I once belonged to a white man. His name was Lewis. He bought me, like you buy an animal. I worked, cooked, took beatings. When I became pregnant with Runa, he said the child would be sold if I disobeyed." Her voice trembled, but her eyes did not. "I ran. Took my daughter to the edge of the forest. But when I heard horses chasing us, I left her by an abandoned house and led them away. I thought I would die, but Runa lived." She looked up. In the firelight, her dark eyes were as deep as night. "Not weak, only heavy with pain. I never meant to come back, but when I saw smoke from your roof, I knew my child was there." Gareth said nothing. Her words weighed on his heart like stones. He had thought he understood loss, but now he saw there were wounds deeper than war. Slowly he spoke. "Around here, no one asks about the past. I don't need to know where you've been. I only know you came back." Tyen looked at him for a long time. Then she reached out her hand, sun-worn and calloused, and touched his cheek. "You're not afraid of me?" "No, I'm only afraid you'll leave." In that moment, the fire crackled like a heartbeat. Between the quiet man and the woman once bound by fear, something began to loosen. Not through words, but through the simple act of being there for each other. Outside, the wind had stopped. On the roof, the last drops of rain fell in slow rhythm. In the firelight, two shadows, one large, one lean, merged into one on the wooden wall, the first imprint of what might finally be called a home. On a summer afternoon, the sun scorched the prairie like fire. The sound of insects droned thick in the air, like a warning hum of something coming. Gareth Hale was tying the gate at the goat pen when his old horse suddenly reared, letting out a sharp whinny and jerking against the reins. Moments later came the sound of hooves, heavy, steady, like someone who knew they had the right to walk in wherever they pleased. From the southern ridge, Lewis appeared, tall, wiry, his face flushed from liquor and sun, a weathered Winchester in his hand. "Heard you're keeping my Apache woman," he said, voice hoarse and cracked. "And that little bastard kid of hers." Gareth did not move. His eyes narrowed, one hand drifting near the revolver at his hip. "She does not belong to anyone." Lewis snorted and spat into the dirt. "Wrong, friend. I bought her with real gold. She's my property. You're harboring stolen goods." Tyen stepped out onto the porch. The sunlight lit her towering frame, sun, darkened shoulders, deep black eyes like a canyon. Scars from old whippings still visible on her skin. She showed no fear. She only stood there, silent, like a statue carved from bronze. Runa hid behind her mother, trembling. "Go inside, Tyen," Gareth said quietly, but she shook her head. Lewis glanced from her to him, sneering. "Oh, I get it now. You've been in her bed, huh? All men are the same, skin gets a little darker." And suddenly it's some kind of thrill. Before he could finish the grin forming on his face, Gareth drew his gun. The hammer cocked back with a sound like thunder. "Get off this land," he said, voice low and final. Lewis raised his eyebrows and slowly lifted his rifle. "I am not going anywhere. I came to take back what is mine." Time stopped. A gust of wind rattled the wooden post where the sign read, "Hale Ranch." Two gunshots rang out at once. The first was Lewis's. His bullet grazed Gareth's cheek. The second was Gareth's, short, clean, and true. Lewis fell backward, the sun flashing across his wide, lifeless eyes. His mouth was twisted in a crooked smile. The smell of gunpowder drifted into the hot wind. Tyen stepped forward slowly, looking down at the body of the man who had once owned her. There were no tears, only a long breath, like a soul released from chains. Gareth dug the grave behind the ridge, where the wind always blew from the west. Tyan stood beside him, silent. When the earth covered the chest of the man who had tormented her for years, she placed a white stone on top. "Let him rest," she said softly, "so I can rest too." Night fell. When they returned to the house, Runa was sound asleep, her face peaceful. Gareth sat down and washed the blood from his hands. Tyan knelt in front of him, placing her large hand over his warm, strong, lightly trembling. Neither of them spoke, but both knew. From this moment on, the past had been laid to rest. That night, the wind was still, only the steady chirp of crickets outside the porch, and the smell of damp earth after a light rain remained. Inside the small wooden cabin, the fire flickered against smoke-darkened walls. Gareth Hale sat by the hearth, his hand still swollen from where it had gripped the gun. He had brought that man down for a woman, for a child, and for something he still could not name. Behind him, Tyan stepped out from the back room, her black hair damp, falling over sun-darkened shoulders. The thin fabric of her shirt clung to her skin, outlining the firm but graceful lines of her muscles like something carved from scorched bronze and prairie wind. In the firelight, she looked both powerful and strangely fragile. She sat beside him. They were silent for a long time. Outside, the old horse snorted into the dark. Inside, only the sound of two people breathing and the soft crackle of burning wood. "You did not have to do that," Tyan said softly. Gareth stared into the flames. "I know. But he would have come back, and I made a promise not to let you be afraid again." She bowed her head, her large calloused hands reaching for his. The touch was rough, but warm all the way to the bone. "All my life, men have only used their hands to hurt," she whispered. "Tonight, maybe I want to remember a different kind of hand." He looked up. In those deep black eyes, for the first time, there was no fear, only trust. Gareth gently touched her cheek, where a faint scar traced across the bronze skin. She did not flinch, and when he leaned in, their lips met slow, soft, trembling. There was no rushed desire, only two souls brushing together through the ash of old wounds. She let him hold her. Her body, strong and solid, seemed to melt against his like warm stone after rain. They sat that way for a long while, until the fire burned low, and the last glow danced across bronze skin and mingled breath. No one said love, no one made promises. They simply existed bare, at peace, like two surviving creatures in a world that had once been too cruel. Before sleep, Tyan murmured, her voice low and steady like the wind, "You gave me a place to breathe." Gareth smiled, placing his hand over her chest, where her heartbeat thudded steady like a distant drum across the prairie. "And you," he said, "you reminded me I am still alive." Outside, dawn had not yet come, but the sky was already beginning to pale. And in that small house, in the heart of a harsh land, two lost souls had found a warmth that neither war nor loneliness could take away. Spring came late to the high plains of Wyoming. The snow melted into thin streams that ran along the fence lines, trickling into the valley where Gareth Hale was bent over, planting the first corn seeds of the season. The sun slipped out from behind the clouds, gentle and golden, spilling light across his silver hair and sun-worn skin. Laughter echoed from the porch. Runa was running around the goat pen, a little wooden doll in her hand, shouting, "Pa! Pa, look!" From inside the house, Tyan stepped out. She was healthy now, her sun-darkened face glowing under the open sky. The coarse cotton dress she had sewn herself flared gently in the breeze, and on her belly, a new curve had begun to form, small, but enough to change everything. Gareth saw it and smiled. He set the hoe down and walked toward the porch. She greeted him with a gentle look, the kind only those who have walked through hell can give, knowing the true weight of peace. "She has grown," Tyan said, watching Runa dance and twirl. "And there will be another," Gareth replied. Tyan smiled, a smile that spread slowly like sunlight crawling across the prairie. That afternoon, they worked together. She chopped wood, he patched the barn, and the little girl hummed softly in Apache. In the wind, the small house no longer echoed with emptiness. It was full of life, of breath. That evening, the three of them sat around the old wooden table for dinner. Runa placed a small silver ring in the center of the table, a gift Tyan had carved with her short knife, shaped like two rising trails of smoke entwined. "Keep it," Tyan said. "One day, you will understand. Smoke always finds its way to the sky, no matter which way the wind blows." Gareth watched them in silence, the towering woman whose hands could cook, mend rifles, and love. And the Apache child who once trembled on his porch, now laughing in firelight. He thought, perhaps holiness did not need a church, nor justice a courtroom, just one person willing to open a door, and another brave enough to stay. That night, as wind howled across the plains, Gareth sat on the porch, Tyan leaning against his shoulder. The silver moonlight washed over the fields, catching in the dark strands of her hair.